What happens here is it's a miracle. It's where Jesus exercises his sovereign dominion and authority over nature. And he does so in the region of Galilee, and 25 of his 33 recorded miracles are in that region. The reason that there's such a big storm, you've got the lake at sea level, and it's oftentimes hot, much like our own climate. And then next to that, you have Mount Hermon, which at its peak is about 9,000 feet up. And so if you've traveled up to the mountains, you know that the weather and the climate is very, very different. So you'd have very cold winds from the top of Mount Hermon rushing down, hitting the lake, colliding with the warmth, and the result is surging storms and tumultuous seas. And so those who were fishermen, they understood that that was the tenuous nature of their profession in that location. So Jesus is exhausted, because he's been preaching all day. The context is he's been preaching all day. He had been preaching and crowds came, so he got in the boat and he had them row him out so that as he preached, his voice would be amplified over the waters. And let me say this. This is where I get to complain a little bit, if that's okay with you. Preaching is exhausting. It's exhausting. I can tell you this after 30 years. After you're done preaching, there's a level of exhaustion that is very unusual. It's because not only do people come to church, but so do powers, principalities, and spirits. And sometimes you're sick and you're tired and you've got brain fog and, heaven forbid, hypothetically, your first sermon goes on a live stream to the internet to 1 million people every week, some of whom hate your guts and hope you messed up and you're on cold medicine and are very confident that's exactly what you're going to do. It's a little bit of anxiety and stress. And so the result is, for those who preach and teach, they have shown that it's equivalent 1 hour of genuine preaching to 8 hours of working a typical job. And so it's just exhausting. And I've preached my whole life, and I love preaching and teaching the Word of God, but I've never experienced anything quite as exhausting. I've been in sports and fights and boxing, and I've worked as a longshoreman, and nothing is exhausting for me as preaching. And I've almost preached myself to death. There was years I preached, 6, 7 times on a Sunday. And then I would preach during the week, 10, 12, 15 times a week. The worst I ever did, it was a terrible idea, I was young. And if you're young, you're foolish. And if you disagree, you prove my point. Anyways, I was young, and so I was in Australia, and in 10 days, I preached 30 different sermons in 3 different cities. Yeah, exactly. Some of you are like, how'd you do? You're like, I have no idea. I can't remember. It was just all one big sermon. And so for me, I know the exhaustion of preaching, and anybody who, is married to, or maybe their dad or grandpa was a preacher, you know what it looks like the next day when they're having their recovery. It's overwhelming. It's exhausting. And if you really love your people and you really are trying to proclaim truth, there's a lot of resistance to that, and there's a lot of weight that comes with that. So here Jesus is preaching and teaching, and Jesus is preaching and teaching, and he is so tired, he falls asleep where? On a boat. Do you know how tired? And this is not a cruise ship, by the way. I'll show you in a moment. They've uncovered what this boat probably looked like. Now, let me say this. Some of you don't need to drink energy drinks. Some of you don't need to turn on your adrenal glands. Some of you don't need to drink more caffeine. Some of you need to be like Jesus and take a nap. Okay? Write that down. Right? See those bracelets? What would Jesus do? He would take a nap. Be like Jesus, take a nap. Jesus is just tired, man. He's just worn out. Thanks for joining me. My name is Pastor Mark. I've been teaching the Bible for more than 3 decades and head-on constant collisions with woke culture. And I would love to get you more Bible teaching. 2 things you can do. Go ahead and watch the sermon in total and also subscribe to the channel. And I'll just keep sending you Bible teaching and we'll have a lot more fun together.